Welcome to the RedState Weekly Briefing. I am your host, Aaron Gardner. With us this week, we have Thomas Leduc, as always, and we also have a special guest with us, Laura Boughton.
Boughton, close.
Boughton. I still mess it up. She told me before we went on air, but I still managed to mess it up. Yes, we don't have the sound effects today, but if we did, it would definitely be the Price is Right failure sound effect right there. So this last week, also we're going to have Dan Spencer joining us later on in the evening. He has a dinner that he is attending right now and wasn't able to make it in time. And then we also have Caleb Howe's Spirit here. He's not able to make it either, but we're going to be as snarky as we can just because that's what we do. And actually, I just got an email from Dan Spencer, and it turns out he's not going to be able to make it at all either. But that's okay. We're going to go ahead and talk about some of his work. This last week, all four of us, actually Caleb, myself, Leduc, Lauren, and Dan Spencer, all five of us, were in Detroit for covering Netroots Nation and also looking at the Detroit rising, the comeback of Detroit such that it is. Now, we saw a great many things while we were there. It spanned the whole gambit. You could go one place and see entrepreneurs who were trying to really invest in the community and do good things for people and rebuild not only the business opportunities in Detroit, but the morale of those who are trying to do business in Detroit. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you saw people who maybe think they're doing a good thing, but in all honesty, they're only contributing more to the bad reputation of Detroit and probably should be exposed for being somewhat fraudsters and hucksters. So those are kind of the two opposite ends, and there's a lot of stuff in between. But I want to just first start off and say I don't believe that the Detroit comeback is as strong as many like to think it is. I also don't believe that they're doing the correct things fundamentally to make Detroit come back in any way, shape, or form to its former glory. Right now we have people who, in my view, have just found a new honeypot from which to draw from, and this time it happens to be gullible philanthropists who are footing the bill rather than taxpayers or companies paying into pension funds. So from there, I want to go ahead and bounce over to Lauren because she is the one who brought us all together to bring us out to Detroit this week. She is the online outreach director for the Franklin Center, and she did. I just want to say up front, she did a really good job of bringing a really good group of people to Detroit to cover Netroots Nation and the humanitarian stories involved with Detroit's comeback. And I would just like to personally thank her for the work that she did and her staff there that she had. They were all excellent and made sure that we all were where we needed to be and had what we needed to have so that we could cover the stories in the proper way. So, Lauren, let me go ahead and kick it over to you and just kind of tell us about your week and what you saw, and we'll go from there.
Great, definitely. I want to thank you guys for coming because that was awesome. Definitely, it's actually kind of hard to find a good group of people to get together and go to one place, so I'm really glad that it worked out, and I was quite happy with the turnout of the event. Just a little example of what we were trying to do. We're trying to tell the positive story about Detroit, and I'm not sure if anybody saw Reason's Anarchy in Detroit, but they did a really wonderful series about how if change happens in Detroit, it's going to be with the people, not with the government. So our whole mission was to basically say the government should get out of people's lives and let them take care of the community that they care about. So a lot of the projects that we went to see, one of them was the Heidelberg Project, which I know Leduc has some special thoughts on that. I thought it was awesome. But we tried to get the view of small business owners and locals in Detroit who care about their city and want their city to succeed. So for us coming in, it was, of course, hard not being familiar with the city, but I think overall it went fairly well. Yeah, some of the projects we went to, I know we split up into two groups, so not all of us got to go to all of the field trips. But on the first day, we really focused on small businesses, and I thought that was really cool to see because there was one startup called Tech Town, which basically just tried to help small businesses. They had rentable office space and shareable office space for companies with 3 to 4, 5 employees, and usually when they get their 6th employee, then they have to move to an office. So their goal is to help small businesses and bring small businesses back to Detroit, and they even made a comment that they would like to diversify, as they know in the past it's all been focused on the auto industry, but they wanted to kind of change this. So that's something that really struck me as important, and I think that if Detroit has a comeback, it's going to be because of the people and not because of the government.
Well, I absolutely think you're right there. And, we did have multiple opportunities to see different things that are going on that by the people you see action and direct action and helping actions that are definitely good for Detroit and the possibility of it coming back. But on the other hand, you also do have, we sat down with a panel that had Councilman Tate on there and some other people, and a lot of them, although they understand that it's going to take private sector investment to bring this comeback to Detroit, they don't seem to understand that they have an obligation and a duty at this point to decrease the barriers to entry, not just take some money from philanthropists and spread it around, but they should really do some fundamental transformations. I don't think they're personally there yet. So it's frustrating to me to see good efforts that could be spoiled because of government inaction and just, frankly, intellectual laziness and an unwillingness to look at what has run Detroit for the last 40 years and really question, okay, should we maybe change this? And on that, I want to go over to Leduc for a moment, because as we've he is from the Detroit area. He is the man about town, and some might even say he's the Matt Walsh of Detroit. So, to you, Leduc.
With 25% less caring. What really struck me this weekend, and I'm trying to boil it down to the simplest thing for some of the interviews that I'll do, and then I'm going to write a piece on this too, is that Detroit's gone through this bankruptcy, and what we saw were a bunch of people that were invested in the city, want the city to do well. And Aaron, you and I covered an event on Friday that was an outreach of the Netroots thingy-dingy that was going on there, that you had a bunch of people marching in the streets of Detroit saying that you don't need to pay for a public service, that you shouldn't need to pay for a public service. So is Detroit going to continue to go down this route, or is it going to go the route that you have a lot of people, as well-intentioned as some of these people are? I think that you can move in the right direction because you're willing to learn, because you are well-intentioned. But are they going to go that route, the more individual, get the government out of as much as possible, or is it going to go with the streetwalkers that we saw with the Water Should Be Free rally? And I don't know. I mean, this is my third incarnation of Detroit is coming back. It happened in the early 90s when Mayor Archer was elected. It happened in the first term of Kwame Kilpatrick, who's now sitting in jail. And the reason why he's sitting in jail is because he manipulated the water department to skim money for him and his friend Bobby Ferguson.
Wasn't there also wasn't he basically hedging against the pension funds at the same time, the city's pension funds at the same time? I know that wasn't illegal, but it's definitely not an ethical high standard.
Probably. I'm not specifically sure about that. There was about $80 to $85 million skimmed off of the water department. And the funny thing is about this, the water department has been federally managed by a federal judge since the late 70s. It's Coleman Young wrote the book. Kwame Kilpatrick ripped a page right out of that book, but he got caught. So I'm trying to boil it down, like I said, to the simplest thing, and I'm taking a look at this and thinking, okay, is it going to be with the people that we visited that are actually putting a lot of sweat equity and they care about the city? Or is it going to go with the same group hive mentality of we should get something for free with nothing because we're going to come up with a cute chant and chant it across the board until we get our way?
Well, I think Ben Howe actually makes a good point on this, and he was actually there as well, filming some footage for a new documentary he's doing on Detroit, a follow-up to his original documentary, Bankrupt. So you should look for trailers from that and stuff like that from Ben as well soon. But he makes a good point about this. We've created this bailout mentality. We've allowed bailouts of industries such as the auto industry. We've allowed bailouts of banks. And quite honestly, the people now expect a bailout as well because they're the ones who are now feel like they don't get a fair shake. They've experienced increases in their water rates due to this and that and the other thing, and a lot of that being the corruption that has been in there since the 70s, as you stated. So he makes a good point there, but that being the case, I empathize with them. I do still think it's totally insane to think that you can get water to come out of your tap and it should be free, considering the infrastructure that's there, transmitting it to get to you, making sure that it's clean, filtered, and isn't killing kids. These are all important things, and if the water started killing people because of lack of filtration systems, I'm sure that would be considered a horrible thing and probably be called racist. Lauren, what do you think?
Yeah, so I actually didn't get to go to the water rally, but I'd heard about it, and I know since you guys were there, do you think it was a larger population from Netroots or from the local community?
I think there was a good representation of the community there, and honestly, I don't think that many Netrooters, so to speak, were involved as much because honestly, they're a bunch of privileged people who don't want to get sweaty.
No.
But I had the opportunity to walk alongside a activist from Detroit who's actually running for city council, and he had some choice words to say about this, that, and the other thing, and I got that videotaped while I was chanting alongside him that whose water? Our water. It was a beautiful moment of solidarity between races and partisanship, and it was great. Maybe a bit of a lie, but it was great anyhow. But I think there was a good representation from the community there. What I want to know is, I think in many ways there's a confluence of populism that brings the left and the right together, in which we speak past each other, but we're really talking about the same things. Mm-hmm. It isn't right that a lot of these people have had, the water administration be jacked with so much to where they're paying unreasonable rates for water, and that it's to the point. We're seeing. It's hard to judge the individuals in all of this when we're seeing it at the tail end. We don't know for how long they've struggled, so to speak, with this. And I see them as victims of government, but I also think they need to come up with a better way to address this than direct action and marching into the water administration and trying to steal the keys to turn it back on. That's just ridiculousness.
I want to flip that really quick to Lauren's question. I saw it totally different. I think they emptied out the place. So you had about 2,500 to 3,000 people marching, okay, which was about where Yeah, hold on. Okay, so there's about 25 to 3,000 people marching. When they started getting the local politicians to speak, it peeled off to about 500 to 800 people there. I think those were the locals, okay, because they wanted to hear, because it was mostly local people talking. So if you're talking about a third of the people in that march were locals, let's say, you might have had some stragglers that were from outside of town, but they all came out for the march because they all want to march. That's still a third, and that's still a lot of people. And I talked to probably 8 to 10, and I mean, really try to. The mindset with me is, if I can just plant a seed in one person's mind and go, okay, wait a minute, I'm not for them putting public money into the stadiums, man. I'm not for them putting public money into building a train that goes 4 miles. I'm with you. But what do you do when you eliminate this debt for the water, and in 5 years, all that money, now all of a sudden, bills are due again? What do? you got to try to get beyond this whole thing about we got screwed somehow. Everybody's gotten screwed. There's no denying that, and I'm not going to deny that. So a third of the people out there were local Detroiters. I guess I could say, damn, it should have been larger. Maybe it should have been small. I don't know, but it puts questions in my mind.
Yeah. Well, I read someplace that the water in Detroit, you have to pay 48% more on average than other places in the country. Can't remember. I think it was an article that came out last week. I forget which publication it was, but if that's the case, and if you want people to move to Detroit, then having high taxes and high costs on things is not the way to do it. Of course.
We used to have the cheapest. Right. We used to have the cheapest water. And the reason that it's gone up is because of the Kwame Kilpatrick scandals, and now they have to pay to catch up with this stuff that the jobs that were being contracted out weren't really being done correctly. So when a water main breaks and it's redone, well, Bobby Ferguson was skimming, 25% off the top and using cheaper materials so he could put even more money in his pocket. Well, now you have to go back and redo that. And so up here in the suburbs, you have people screaming a bloody murder about this, that in some cases their water bills have gone up 50 to 75% in the past 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yep, right. Instead of helping people, it just ends up hurting people in the long run.
Yep.
And
yeah.
I think.
And I want to know when I was saying that I thought most of them were from Detroit local. I was talking about those who actually stayed for the rally, not just the march. You're absolutely right. The Netrooters, they came out, and actually I saw Netrooters peeling off throughout the march.
Yeah.
And coming in throughout the march. So I think they were doing little shifts so that nobody got overworked.
Aaron, I led the march.
I know. I saw. You led the march for a while, and it was impressive.
I know.
But also I want to talk a little bit more about what Thomas said. You brought it up briefly. The old Joe Louis Arena. They're going to revamp that apparently, and they're going to try and put up a new ice hockey rink, and they're going to be using money for that. Now that to me is a little bit ridiculous. Now, and I'm gonna draw a parallel, or I'm gonna draw out a little analogy here for a moment. Let's say that you had a bunch of people in a urban area who weren't able to pay their bills, but on Friday night the local casino was fully packed. Would you feel like those people were being irresponsible, yes or no?
Well, sure.
Okay, Lauren?
Sorry, I was trying to I'm not going to lie, I didn't hear half the question.
Okay, what I said is, say you had an urban area where you had a bunch of people who couldn't pay their bills, but every week the local casino was packed full. Wouldn't you think?
Yeah, no, absolutely. They're obviously not prioritizing where they would need to put their funds if that's the case.
Right. And now what I want to say here is that we actually have that and that in government in Detroit. So you have people in Detroit who are living in areas where 90% of the people aren't paying their water, and therefore they're getting their water shut off. A lot of those same people you will see Friday night at the Greektown Casino all night long. Yep. Now, you have the city of Detroit, who is underfunded in their water administration and can't provide the services properly even outside of the water administration for the people of Detroit, taking a bunch of money and building a new ice hockey rink while they already have a perfectly functional ice hockey rink. Mm-hmm. The analogy is precise. The people and the government of Detroit have decided to just YOLO and just go for it and not even worry about what's in the past and what they have to pay, whether it's bills for water transportation and cleaning and sewage and all that thing, or bills for water, sewage, and all that in your house. They would rather spend it on the new shiny or the casino than do the right and responsible thing. So I have a hard time. I am empathetic, but I have a hard time remaining empathetic sometimes, because it's a constant battle with me where, do they deserve my empathy or do they not? Because both the government and the people seem to not care. while saying they do.
Well, something that Rachel Mullen said that struck me yesterday is she saw all the inspirational things that we'd seen and all the things that people were trying to do and said, gosh, I hope that they actually get councilmen that they deserve and don't keep voting boneheads back into office, which is so true. And that's kind of that's the thing. It's almost hopeless, or I don't know. I also go back and forth. You think, wow, these people want to make change, but then they keep voting the wrong people into office, and I don't know if...
Well, and you know, actually, I don't even know if the voting matters at this point, because correct me if I'm wrong, Thomas, but they're not even, the council doesn't even run the show.
Council and the mayor right now are being paid their full salaries but have zero authority because of the emergency manager, and that's been that way since he took over, I believe, April of last year. The interesting thing that you bring up about the stadiums is that Comerica Park, the baseball stadium, was built in 2000 with public money. Mike Ilitch put in a little bit. The Wayne County Stadium Authority technically owns the stadium, but the Tigers generate all the revenue and keep that. Ford Field opened in 2002. At the time, same thing, owned by the Wayne County Stadium Authority. The Fords put in a little bit more of their own money, but the Detroit Lions take all the revenue in from that and keep that. The hockey arena is going to be the same thing. The dirty little secret in town is Mike Ilitch, who owns the Tigers and the Red Wings, owns Little Caesars Pizza, is a billionaire that is cash poor. He could not get a loan in 2000 or building the Comerica Park by any banks in the United States. He had to go outside and get bank loans from Japan. It is the same situation. He's a billionaire on paper. He's cash poor. He needs this stadium built because the current stadium, Joe Louis Arena, it was crap when it opened in 1979. It's crap now with the age. But if he were to try to build this thing by himself, he couldn't. And the key to this is, if you go back and look at articles in 2000 when Comerica Park was built, and then they announced the plans for Ford Field, the football stadium right across Brush Street, these were the regenerations of Detroit. Detroit was coming back. And 13, 14 years later, it goes bankrupt. These public works projects don't work.
Let me actually bring that up. Wasn't Detroit the model city for the Great Society?
You know what? I read about this. There was a stat that I read, and I can't remember where I read it, but there was a stat that I read one time that's since 1965, $1 trillion of federal money has flowed through Detroit in one way, shape, or form. $1 trillion since 1965. And you guys, you were with me. I mean, Aaron, we took that ride around town and everything and such. I know Lauren, and all the events that you went to. You were taking a look at going through some neighborhoods and everything that you would be like, wait, $1 trillion has gone through this since 1965. They might have been just flushing it in the river just to feed fish. I have no idea. But honestly, that. Go ahead.
Oh no, I just Googled it, Aaron. You're right. It was one of the model cities for the Great Society for the War on Poverty, which, if that doesn't speak volumes about which policies work, then I don't know what does.
Absolutely. It's the blue state model. It's what we've been living under. What many urban cities have been living under for a long time, especially those in the Midwest and in the Union states. That's the model they live under. It's the same with Chicago, Illinois. We had the Manhattan Institute, I believe it was, and Manhattan Institute with in conjunction with state policy, state budgets. State budget solutions. They gave a panel that we all attended, or most of us attended, that was very good on laying out the destructive policies that have brought Detroit to the brink, and then it's also showed us that there's other places that are nearing where Detroit is. One of them is Chicago, and honestly, what frightens me is that the federal money and philanthropist money that ends up going into Detroit encourages Chicago not to address its issues. And they're on the same track that Detroit was on And in some ways, it was said that they're even in worse shape due to their pensions. So to me, I would like to see California and many of the counties there, and Chicago and Detroit not keep getting bailed out because the people just continually are getting hurt in this process, whether they're left-wing people voting for bad policies or right-wing people who are being forced to move out of neighborhoods that they may have lived in for ages. Either way, it's bad. I mean, there's places that we went to with Thomas that it literally looked like a tornado had come through and taken 1 or 3 houses away and left 2 or 3 there. And it was sad. It was horrible what we saw. And as I was going to bed each night, I watched the local Detroit news on Channel 4. And one of the last things that I saw last night was that there was a double shooting, actually, in the neighborhood that Leduc and I were in with Jake Caruso and Rachel Mullen. It was couldn't have been more than 4 hours after we had been in the neighborhood. And then on top of that, the very next story that they had was how a school bus stop was basically a place for streetwalkers to hang out and be hookers, and that it's a horrible problem and that the police aren't responding to it. So it's absolutely heartbreaking to see these things that are occurring, and I don't want to see more money thrown into this process while that sort of stuff isn't being taken care of.
Well, and I think that, because I saw the difference between downtown and the other places in Detroit, and all of the people that we talked to, and I would like to tell everyone everybody who was there pretty much participated in politics, but the people we talked to weren't political people. They were just people. And they all had a sense of hope, and they all said the same thing. Even one guy had a Obama 2012 sticker on his car, and he even said, "The change starts with you." He quoted Gandhi, and I don't know the quote, but he said something, "You have to be the change that you want to see." And everybody had the common theme of, hey, this is Detroit, the city government screwed us over, but you know what? We want to make a difference. And this was at the Heidelberg Project, which is basically this guy just takes a bunch of, he calls it art. It's interesting. Whether or not you like his projects that he does, the theme and the sense of self-responsibility that he had was awesome to see. I guess that neighborhood used to be one of the murder capitals of the world, and he came in and, I mean, it's weird, but he nailed teddy bears and stuff to trees and brought the community, it was able to bring the community together. And he said that the biggest thing that he's seen in that area is establishing a sense of trust with his neighbors. And personally, I know that we all talk about politics and that we think politics is going to save us. I think it's more an ideology of, hey, this is my community. I care about my community. I need to step in and do something. And I mean, I think you mentioned earlier, Aaron, that you would just hate to see the government keep these people down. And personally, I think the best thing that could happen in Detroit is, instead of pumping money into downtown and pumping into the areas that everybody sees, like putting money into stadiums, I think that they need to, I hate saying the word empower, but empower people to take on responsibility in their communities and get out of the way. Just get out of the way. The government clearly drove the city into the ground, so just get out. Like, the people are the ones who know about it. The people are the ones who care. And if you have a bunch of, as you said, like privileged city councilmen running around that don't relate to anybody, it causes a rift not only between the city government and the people, but it also, you have a bunch of people who are so out of touch. And I think that was something that was really interesting to see, because sure, we see this in Detroit, but I think the underlining issue in Detroit is we kind of see this all over the country. As people have self-responsibility taken away from them and put into government. And government doesn't solve problems. In my experience, government creates problems. So that's my rant about what I saw in Detroit.
Well, I think you're definitely right on that last point, and I have to bring Thomas into the discussion on the Heidelberg project.
Yeah.
Now, as you know, I didn't stay for the tour. We just kind of did a drive-by, so to speak.
Literally.
But we came in, I took some photos, I checked some stuff out. I went over to the information booth and I read his spiel and saw his sign up there saying that any pictures that were taken were only for personal or educational use and that all art is protected by the U.S. copyright, blah, 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 USC section, blah, 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 blah. Which honestly, that just isn't true. He can't actually copyright a city block as much as he might like to think he can. He can't. But anyhow, I saw something that was a little different, a little creepy. It didn't seem like art to me. It seemed a lot like waste. And one thing that I was kind of upset about was the shoes on the fence. Now, to me, what I saw was perfectly good shoes that could have been taken down to a homeless shelter. This guy apparently saw art that he could put up on a wall. What I saw was a pair of cleats for a 12-year-old who probably can't afford cleats this year for school. What he saw was a way to put art on a fence. So to me, I feel like this guy's misguided. I feel like he's not on the right path. And from what Leduc has told me, I think the guy might be a charlatan. But I'm going to let him tell you that. So, Leduc, I'm going to pass this off to you, and I'm going to let you and Lauren go at it for a little bit because I think you guys might.
Jeez. Wow.
Hey, all I'm going to say is Andrew Breitbart agreed with me, so...
Oh!
Oh! All right, Leduc.
No, that's what Breitbart said was he dug the vibe. I mean, he understood the vibe of what they're trying to do. I just before I go into Heidelberg, I just wanted to circle back to something you guys were talking about the personal responsibility. In the One State Policy Network, the first forum that they had, where they had Councilman Tate and then Police Chief Craig there. Craig is talking about how he had to get 200 cars donated to him, and that he could not afford updated suits of armor for his officers. That struck me as incredibly odd that the city is spending a ton of money on other projects, and you have to go begging for philanthropy to get brand new police cars or just a basic protection thing for some officers that are going out on the streets of a very dangerous city.
Yeah.
That's actually, I would say, that's criminal.
Yes,
If you're not willing to provide the people who are supposed to be acting on behalf of the city the very tools that they need, and you have to go cup in hand to get police cars or at least vests, maybe just scrap all the other plans you have and get that taken care of, and then let's have a discussion or debate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to go into Heidelberg, I haven't changed my view on this. I still think it's too idealistic. And after listening to Tyrone, I feel the same way. He has a vision. That's fine.
Terrell.
Terrell? Yeah, Terrell. He should. I literally, and there are pictures out there of me with Grumpy Cat. I was distraught listening to him, because I did feel as though it was just, it was a sales job.
Let me
he's got a vision. Well, let me finish. He's got a vision.
It's a pertinent question to what you're saying. So, do you guys have to pay for that tour?
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't know that until yesterday, actually, because we had somebody else organizing that event. But yeah, we had to pay for that, which I don't agree. If you're trying to sell an idea that you believe in, you shouldn't have to make somebody else pay for it. So that I did think was dumb, to be honest. But
well, okay, they're capitalists. Good for them. And I'm all for capitalists. So the guy's got a vision. Okay, fine, good. I don't have to agree with that because as a libertarian, I don't have to agree with everything you do as long as it's not your rights end at your nose. But okay, so am I going to go down there and volunteer time or anything? No. And Katie Hearn, who was our guide, who I think did a fantastic job. I really think so. And I asked her, I said, let me play devil's advocate with you. I mean, do you think that all the time that is spent for the 26 years since this was started in, what the hell, it's going to be 28. I think that she said it started in 1986. All the time that's been spent building up these two streets that you could be taking and building up homes that are livable for other people, kind of like Habitat for Humanity and everything. And she basically, I mean, she didn't dodge a question. She was like, well, sure, maybe. But if people come here and say, oh, I can do something with my neighborhood, and you're not going to do a bunch of Heidelbergs and bring the neighborhoods back in Detroit. So that's not going to work because if you would have noticed, Terrell does not live in Heidelberg. He doesn't live there. I'm pretty sure Katie said she doesn't either. She lives near the hospital that she was born. Mm-hmm. So you're not going to do a bunch of Heidelbergs because you're going to have a lot of ticked off people. But if you can make those neighborhoods safe and get people involved, like it was 50, 60 years ago, where everybody was concerned what was happening on the block, not necessarily telling other people how to live, but taking care of their own property, their own home, and being involved in the vitality of the community, Detroit can come back. I just don't see Heidelberg as a viable option.
No, and I would agree. I mean, I would be pissed if somebody started shoving old ratty high heels into my fence. I didn't like. He considered it art. I didn't. I think that art is something that you have to have talent for, which I did not believe. But with that being said, I think the idea is, and you'll appreciate this, LeDuc, as a libertarian, I support every weird thing that he does. Even if I don't agree with it, I support him because he actually went out and went into his neighborhood and he watched all 4 of his brothers die. He said he was one of 5. All of them died. They had they said the rate of the black male, they called it a survival rate, and they said that it was less than 50%. And by survival rate, it was not only being shot, but also making it through life without going to prison. And they said that since that's happened, that's increased. So I guess my point is he's doing something. And as I know, a lot of the people that we were with thought that it was ridiculous, but we always preach as conservatives. We preach small government. We preach personal responsibility. We preach that people need to take matters into their own hands. So even though I thought it was weird, and there were like, I mean, there's teddy bears nailed to trees. That's weird. But you know what? He is going out and he's doing something and he cares. And I'm not going to fault him for that no matter what. And even though I don't like it, I would definitely support him. I mean, they said that 300,000 people came through there to see his stuff and that somebody's doing a documentary on him. So I think that that is important, that even if anything, you're obviously not going to solve Detroit's problems with that, but it clearly has its merits in that community anyway. And we always preach as conservatives, hey, you need to do things on your own, and one answer is not the answer for everything. And I think that's what government does wrong. It makes people conform to their beliefs, and I think that to me, I took away from it that he is trying to solve a problem in his own very unique way. And that's what he's doing. That's what he did. So I definitely credit him for that. I'm not going to go nail teddy bears to my front door, but...
And I'd 100% agree with you on that.
Hey, LeDuc, I want to ask one question just on some of the history of Tyrell. You said this weekend he had some legal altercation with the city or something like this about this Goldberg project. Could you go into that just a little bit and give us a brief explainer on that as well?
And I asked him that question, that if since he had started this, had he developed a better relationship with the city? because he did. When he started this in the mid '80s, Coleman Young was the mayor of the city of Detroit, the city of thy birth. And Coleman was a you do it my way or I'm going to shove you in the river type of dude. He was mayor for 20 years. And he went up against him, and he won because the city had these homes were abandoned. Some of these the homes that he started with were abandoned, and instead of them just sitting there and waiting for the whole process to go through of the homeowner has to they go through court and relinquish the property and then the city takes over it, he was like, hey, I'm going to do something with this. And they went through court battles on this, and Terrell won. He basically was like, yeah, I'm doing something, and the city doesn't like it, the hell with them, because they're not doing anything with it either. And
Yeah.
Coleman was basically like, I'm going to let that sit and rot until I tell you that it's not going to rot, and he lost. So the city basically then just, gave up and let him do it. And I think Katie said that it was only the 2 streets, and so the city figured instead of the bad PR on this, they just gave up on it.
Well, and I mean, if he wasn't there, so if he didn't do that, that street would look like every other street in Detroit, just burnt down homes, vacant lots, places where prosperity used to be, and places where love used to be, and now at least he cares for that block, as opposed to the other blocks where it's just sad and lonely.
Yep. No,
Well, I don't see a huge difference aesthetically between that block and some of the other blocks that I went to. But I did feel, there was a young lady who was out sweeping the street. She was probably maybe 12, 13 years old, young black girl who I assume lives in the neighborhood. And there was families out on their porches and stuff like that. So there was definitely a communal difference between the neighborhoods that I went to where I posed with guns and graffiti was everywhere, and this neighborhood where I didn't bring out any guns and there was rabbits crucified on a tree. So, okay, it was like a stuffed rabbit, a teddy bear rabbit crucified on a tree. But I mean, honestly, some of the blight versus desolate lots and all that stuff, to me, is comparable to what we saw there. I mean, just because you have a old Studebaker buried hip deep in your yard and you've managed to paint it green with polka dots, I'm not sure that quite qualifies as art. At least you should cut it in half and maybe do some Stonehenge with it or something. But just having it buried in there, or putting broken hubcaps from a car onto a bicycle that's also broken, I wouldn't qualify that as art. But to each their own, as you guys said. One thing I want to do, I want to wrap back around. We're 40 minutes into the show. We got a couple things that I want to still hit on before we go. I want to wrap back around to the Chicago versus Detroit and how Chicago is actually trending towards Detroit. I'm going to read a couple stats off of a piece of paper that the Illinois Policy Org gave to us at a luncheon that we had. And it starts off by saying that between 2000 and 2013, Chicago saw a 6% loss in population. Between 2000 and 2013, Detroit saw a 27.6% drop in population. For the household median income, 2008 to 2012 in Chicago, it's 47.4 a year. In Detroit, it's 26.9 a year. Persons below the poverty level, 2008 to 2012, Chicago, 22.1%, Detroit, 38.1%. The credit rating from Moody's, Chicago, is just 4 steps above junk bond status. Detroit is about 9 steps below junk bond status. Total pension liabilities, and this is the key point that they made here. In Chicago, well, let me back this up. In Detroit, it's 13,520, and we know that pensions are an issue in Detroit. In Chicago, 18,834. So right now they have a bigger pension burden per household well, they have a decreasing population and an increasing level of poverty. This goes back to the point that was made about the pension systems once being two people providing for every one pensioner, and now we have one pensioner or one worker providing for every two pensioners. So we've flipped the script and we've created a system that is putting a greater burden on the worker than ever before. And we're seeing it also in Los Angeles, New York, and Boston. And they point out all these things where every one of these places have dropped in their ratings over the years, and we're seeing people flee these states, even to their neighboring states with slightly less restrictive regulatory structures. And then on the flip side of this, and this wasn't brought up in any of these meetings so much, except for by friend Jess
Fields.
Jess Fields from Texas Public Policy Foundation. He actually brought up some things and pointed towards places like Austin and places like Texas as a solution, which anybody with half a brain would be able to say that yes, Texas is probably a better economic and regulatory model for any place in America than just about anything else that's out there. So it's very interesting to me, these numbers, and I just wanted to bring those up to show how other places are going the way of Detroit, and just reiterate that it would be terrible if they didn't wake up before that. And before we move on to our last subject, we got about 14 minutes left. Let me go ahead and go back to you, Lauren. Let me ask you, out of everything that you got to see, out of everything we heard from the different panelists, and out of everything that Detroit had to offer down there in Greektown and the food and all that stuff, what was your favorite part about this last week?
So my favorite part was something that only me and my coworker got to experience, because we went to go to Slow's Barbecue, it was, and we got out, we walked to the old train station at night, and some guy all of a sudden started yelling at us, and he said, "Hey, I know you guys want to get in there." And we turned around, and I'm like, "Oh God, I'm away, nobody knows we're over here." I grabbed my purse, but anyway, he comes up, and we started talking to him for 15 minutes, and he was just somebody who was homeless, who lived in the community, and he's telling us all about the history of this train station. And he said he was born in Detroit, grew up in Detroit, and a lot of his friends left, and he said that he loved it, and he said, "I just can't leave." He said, I've seen better days, I've seen hard times, but I love it here, and this is my home. And he just really cared a lot about Detroit and his life and the city. And to me, that summarized the whole theme of the entire reason that we are there is just to support the individual, not the government. So to me, that was the whole thing, because I saw the disconnect from the city council and the local government, and then I saw what was going on with the people. And to me, that was the most important thing that I took away. The people care, and the people are the ones who can make a difference. And if we're talking about taking personal responsibility back to people, and you have to do that through the communities. So I think that Detroit can see somewhat of a revival, probably not what it used to be by any standard, but if it's going to come back, it needs to be through the people who care about the city, because really, like, the federal government can throw money at something, but they're not going to have the love and the knowledge of what should be done with that money. So to me, that was the most important thing, and my favorite thing was just the underlying theme of, we love our city, we have to be the change.
Right. Well, I believe, Leduc, you took us to that same train station, and even though, what was that, Leduc?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. And even though it's old and it's cleared out and it's kind of dilapidated to a certain extent, it is stunning. It is a beautiful building, beautiful architecture, beautiful imagery carved into it. Mm-hmm. And I really wish that if people were really wanting to bring back Detroit and have Detroit rising, somebody should go in there, city council, whoever needs to, emergency manager, reduce all the regulations down to the very bare minimum and allow a philanthropist to go in, renovate that place, and make it one of the most beautiful art museums in Detroit, in Michigan, maybe even in the United States. That's what they ought to do. It would bring a draw there that you wouldn't see elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about an idea like that?
You asking?
Tom? Either one. Whoever wants to speak up.
I mean, if somebody wants to pour... The city at one point under Kwame wanted to make that into the new police station, and because it's busted, broken down, you're talking about it's going to be $1 billion to renovate it. I don't know how dump, even if you had philanthropy or private money, that's a hell of a lot of money to bring back something. So I don't have an opinion on it either way. One of the things about in Detroit here we're really bad about is that we have trouble letting things go. The Tiger Stadium site that I took you guys by, that building sat for 11 years empty before they tore it down, and now the field's just there. And it's been 3 years since they've actually been able to decide what the hell to do with the field. So Detroit is odd in that way. In New York, they tore down Yankee Stadium the next day after the damn last game was played. Here, we hang on to stuff for too long, and then it becomes, a danger to people. And the train station, talk to my mom, when she was a kid, she used to take the train into Detroit for 2 hours. I understand it has a lot of memories. If they can find a way to renovate it, fine, whatever. If not, tear the crap down and build something there that's viable. And Lauren, I understand you went over there with your coworker and everything. If you do something like that again at night, I'll murder you. You told me that,
now I'll have my hobo buddy to show me around.
Seriously, when you told me that, I think my jaw dropped. I was like, what? I wouldn't even do that. There? Yeah, I was like, I've walked in some pretty bad places at night because I was lost, and I acted like I'm supposed to be there because that's half the key. But that, no way, and you know what? I was like, damn.
Yeah, the cab driver today was telling me that's one of the worst places, and I was just like, oh, well, I felt fine. I didn't feel unsafe.
Well, you're our bodyguard from now on.
What's funny is that when we went over there was actually some sort of big party going on in the park, which is there next to. Which that's another point. That's an absolutely beautiful space as far as that park and everything goes. There really is a lot that could be done with that, and I'm very glad that they didn't make that into a police station because it's too beautiful to be a place that only criminals hang out at. So, but what was interesting is that party that we saw going on over there, Thomas, that was actually a remembrance of the Detroit riots. That was some sort of anniversary remembrance about that.
Really?
Yes.
They had a band out there. They had tuba play. I mean, we were like, "What the hell is that?" And
right. It was some sort of remembrance of the Detroit riots, and I saw it on the news, and they mentioned something about Rosa Parks and other stuff, and I don't remember exactly what it was all about, but that's what they.
I love my city. If you watch Bankrupt, you see it. I say, I love it. I love it.
I love it.
I love it. I don't know what other major city is going to have a remembrance of a freaking riot. We just do stuff odd here sometimes, and I can't explain it. It's like the riot was not a good thing, kids. It was not good. No way, shape, or how.
Okay, so I don't want to cut this off. We're having a great time here, but we do have less than 10 minutes left, and I do want to address one last thing that's going to bring us into another issue that doesn't really have much to do with Detroit on one level, but tangentially related in a way that I hope I'll explain. One of the things
you used a really big word there that I don't know.
Well, Matt Walsh knows it, so check yourself. But at any point, hey, by the way, Matt Walsh, if you're watching this, which I'm sure you're not, I actually like your writing. I just, I like messing with people. So
it's true, buddy.
So at any rate, one thing that got brought up a few times during some of these meetings was racism, the impact of racism, white flight, and things like that. White people moving away from Detroit and going to the suburban communities to get away from black ghettos. I hate racism. I hate racism of every sort. I think it's a destructive thing and a hateful thing that only divides us and never brings us together, no matter who it's directed at any given time within America or on the international stage. Unfortunately, in our lives, we still deal with race. And a lot of it is projected race. So some of it is racism that is against white people. We hear things like white privilege and that people who are white are given this and given that. And unfortunately, we hear things such as what we heard down in Mississippi in the primary runoff race between Thad Cochran and Chris McDaniel. Now, I say this is tangentially related to Detroit because race is a factor there because of the imagery that what they remember, their history, and then what they're showed from other places in America today. That it lives and it keeps growing and it keeps growing. And I think it's unfortunate that we have people who consider themselves conservatives who are giving free market messages, who are giving uplifting messages to people who are supposed to be giving uplifting messages to people of self-reliance, and that they can take care of themselves better than any government could ever take care of them, to then at the same time be pitching to them in racist tones, such as was done with the Cochran campaign, accusing his opponent of coming for their welfare checks and such things like that. Now, I think it's horrible that our party gets represented in that fashion, especially when we have things going on in places like Detroit where real racism does still exist. I saw a guy walk into the casino there in Greektown, right in the center of Detroit, who had an SS tattoo on his calf. It was disgusting to me. I wanted to hit him. I didn't, because that's not the type of person I try to be. But that sort of racism does still exist. And when we have Republicans using those sort of race-baiting tactics in other states, people in Detroit see that, and they tend to not trust a Republican. Or as one left-wing person put it to me, a good-looking white boy with glasses.
Yes.
I didn't like that. I didn't like being judged for being white and having good-looking glasses, which I bought at Walmart.
$700.
So it's particularly offensive to me that we've come to this point. It's particularly offensive to me and astounding to me that our Republican leadership has failed to stand up on this issue and take note of it in Mississippi and reprimand those who were responsible for it. It's disgusting to me that the NRSC actually engaged in and paid for some of these ads and funneled the money from different senators and leadership to pay for these racist ads in Mississippi. If ever there's a chance for us to stand up for what's right, it's now. If ever there's a chance that we can shake off the racism that characterizes us through the lenses of the Democrats in inner cities, it's now. Take out people like Cochran. Take out people like Mitch McConnell. Take out these people who willingly go out and destroy our image and destroy who we are by putting out this falseness of the Tea Party, libertarians, and conservatives being stuck in the 1800s and being racists. We don't believe in that. We believe in liberty. We believe in freedom. And just as it says in Detroit, the spirit of Detroit, they have a verse put on there from 2 Corinthians. It says, where the Spirit of the Lord is, so is the spirit of liberty. That's what we need to understand. And that's what's going to bring back Detroit. It's not going to be the racial divisions. It's not going to be the people playing the government against the people. It's not going to be the people taking over the government. It's going to be a real understanding that this is all bigger than all of us. And we need to check our egos at the door. So that's my final word for the Red State Weekly Briefing. I know not everybody on the panel is going to agree with me, and I'll give them all one last word to go ahead and make their points. LeDuc, I'll start with you.
I've made this point pretty clear. Being a lifelong resident of the area, I've seen what racism has done. It absolutely pisses me off to no end. And I thought that what happened down in Mississippi was repugnant. I've told everybody that I know behind the scenes and in public that because of the history of this area, that cannot be tolerated one iota. So I'm 100% agree with you. As the resident Detroiter here, I hope that everybody does come back. I love giving tours, and Detroit, while I don't necessarily, I'm not signed up into the camp of that this is absolutely, we're on the way back, because I think that there's a lot of questions still, and not all of them have been answered, and I see a lot of the same repetitive things that I've seen, in the 90s and the early 2000s. I was incredibly encouraged, even at Heidelberg, by some of the people taking responsibility and saying, the hell, we're not waiting for the cavalry to come in. We're going to do this ourselves. And so I want everybody to come back here at some point, and we'll have Lauren give a tour of the train station, being evidently,
I have connections there now.
Yes, but and I wanted to echo what you said earlier, Aaron, thanking the Franklin Center and Lauren and everybody over there, the great staff, for putting this together, because even as a lifelong resident of the area, I learned an incredible amount, and hopefully this helps improve or learn about what the city's going through, and also prevent other cities from going through this, like you mentioned with Chicago.
Yeah. Well, and as you're talking what happens down in Mississippi, I think that is a perfect example of government doing what government does best, and that is stereotyping people, putting people into categories, and something that Terrell said that struck me. He said, you know what, I don't care if you're black, I don't care if you're white. The world is not black and white. We need to look at each other as people, because that's what we all are. And if you lose that human element of we're in a community together, then you lose. That's just not the way to go about life.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and I loved Detroit. I actually had a lot of people say, oh, sorry, you're in Detroit? That's awful. And I was like, no, this is awesome. I had so much fun. I thought it was so cool, and I think that it is kind of a testing center for what will happen with America, and I loved the spirit of what was going on there. So I'm really glad that you guys came, because we had such a great group, and it's just so awesome. I mean, I live in D.C., and obviously everybody says D.C. is separated from the rest of the country, and it totally is. So for me to get a group of awesome people to go out to Detroit and take time out of their work schedules to try to tell the positive story about Detroit, or tell any story about Detroit, that means a lot to me, and I think that's what will make the difference in the long run for freedom.
Absolutely. It really was a great week. And I joke a lot, but I really did have a good time. I met some great people, not only people in the movement, but people of Detroit. I met a young kid who was not begging, but needed some food, and he was a good kid, and he had an unfortunate story. And my heart goes out to all of the people like that who are there, and there are many of them. And I want to leave us all with some words about federal aid from former President Grover Cleveland, a Democrat. And he wrote this in 1886. And I want you all to just kind of listen and understand what he says here. Federal aid in such cases encourages the expectation of paternal care on the part of the government and weakens the sturdiness of our national character, while it prevents the indulgence among our people of that kindly sentiment and conduct which strengthens the bonds of a common brotherhood. It's really true today as it was in 1886.
Yeah.
The more the government comes in, and specifically Big Daddy government, the paternalistic government who thinks it knows what's best for you, the more it comes in, the more it shoves out the community. And the more
How did you find that quote?
Because I'm related to Grover Cleveland.
Oh, that's right. He's not joking about that either.
You're not.
I'm not. No, I'm actually related to Grover Cleveland.
Right. He brought that up yesterday.
It's one of my favorite quotes. It's one of my favorite quotes in history, and you would think it would be said by somebody like Calvin Coolidge or Ronald Reagan. or even the famous Goldwater, but it was actually one of the greatest Democratic presidents ever, Grover Cleveland.
Who was president twice, correct?
Yes, the only president to ever be elected twice non-consecutively.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So,
Later a Supreme Court justice, I believe.
I can't remember on that one, but I think so.
I'm okay with my history.
Okay, that's good. I trust you, even though you're from Detroit.
Thank you.
So there we have it. Once again, I want to thank everybody for coming on tonight. Lauren, go ahead, give your spiel real quick, where you can be found online and who you work for and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, definitely. I work at the Franklin Center, which is a nonprofit organization that works to expose government waste, fraud, and abuse. You can find me on Twitter at Lauren Boughton, Bouton. Thank you so much, guys.
All right. Thomas, go ahead and give a shout out.
Well, you can find me at ftrradio.com Monday through Thursday on the Snark Factor at 8 p.m. and then on the Red State Weekly Briefing, keeping Aaron Gardner and Caleb in line.
Absolutely. And I am Aaron Gardner, your host, managing editor of RedState.com. You can find me at RedState.com, and you can also find me at Aaron_RS on Twitter. And if you can find me on Facebook, go ahead and try and friend me. I probably will ignore it. Have a great week. We'll be here all week long, and we'll see you next Sunday night at 7 p.m. Eastern.
Thanks so much.
Be here or be square. Bye.